typically people think more outreach I send, the more links I will get. It is a numbers game, but we're seeing that that's not necessarily the case. And I bring that up to say also on the relationship side, I've heard time and time again from journalists, the number one reason they will block you, just straight up block you, is if they get an irrelevant pitch.
Hey everybody, it's Greg. Welcome back to Jolly SEO's TLDR. Today we have Vince Nero, the Director of Content Marketing at BuzzStream. Vince, I was just saying before recording, I'm super jealous of your neon light in the background there. Meant to have one here, so props to you for having that. It's really awesome. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I get a lot of compliments of the neon light. I think I saw it from somebody else and just stole the idea, but it's good. You gotta get the brand out there, right?
If people see it in 5 episodes from now, it's thanks for the reminder. Appreciate it. So we're not actually here to talk about neon lights, but a different aspect of brand, digital PR. My first question for you, Vince, is digital PR seems like it has 7 different definitions right now. Just curious, what is your definition of digital PR?
Yeah, I'll start with my definition and then I'll kind of give you, I think, the other iterations and kind of challenges even that
Great.
I'm facing at BuzzStream. But I think the most direct answer that agencies would give you is building links and brand mentions through pitching to high authority news outlets. Um, depending on who you talk to, though, like digital PR could just be PR that happens online. Um, some agencies roll social into it. Some kind of also roll like any earned media. So like, getting links without even pitching anything, that sort of thing. Um, and I think that the challenge that we're having in the States, at least, or I'm having at BuzzStream, is like people do call it all kinds of different stuff. Like, so they'll call it link building, when they really mean digital PR. They'll call it content marketing when they really. I am starting to see that come around a bit, like even in the past month or so, like with
Oh,
all
wow.
this AI stuff rolling out, people are starting to realize how important brand mentions are. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but I was at a couple of conferences lately, and all of a sudden, people who never really talked about digital PR, all of a sudden talking about this. Like there's agencies are starting to re-add that to their service offering. So it's been interesting.
Yeah, really. And you were talking before recording, you come from agency world, so you've seen this from both sides, right? You're not just in-house on a tool, you've served clients. We've seen that as well. Uh, I know we'll get into it, so I'll try to just hang on a sec. I just wanted to speak briefly for those who are like, yeah, I've heard digital PR, but I have no idea where to start. Obviously, BuzzStream is very robust, has a lot going on, and so is the whole ecosystem. So for someone who's just getting started, is there like a specific Rolodex? I mean, people talk about muckrack, meltwater, all these things, but they're just massive. And besides, my concern is, especially if I'm new to this, doesn't everyone else have these lists? So like, any idea like where do you get started?
Yeah, I mean, I can address it in maybe two different ways. So I think to get started, you really need something newsworthy, right? Like you need a story. You need to have some value that you can provide to a news outlet. Um, that to me is the biggest thing. And people get that, you can buy surveys, but there's like self-service platforms that let you do that. OnePoll, Pollfish, Harris Poll, YouGov, just to name a few off the top of my head, and generate some type of, survey question, some data that tells a story. Leaning, usually the stuff that works well is like leaning into emotion. Um, but then the other side of it is, you might have stuff, you might have proprietary data. That's where it really works well, but that can be tough to get. Um, but you could also tell stories with like maybe you have some interactive tool or something within your website. I think a lot of people that I talk to, a lot of agencies, the very first thing they'll do is look through all the content on a site and determine, hey, is any of this newsworthy? Um, can we pitch this in the summer? For instance, it's starting to get hot here in the States, and some people will look through content and this is a very generic example, but like say you have the best way is to stay cool or something. You could package that up and pitch it with some expert commentary to a news station looking to write about, the hacks to stay cool. So, um, and then that kind of piggybacks into the last thing, which is this like expert commentary. So either you're proactively pitching, kind of you can lean on a trend. So seasonality, there's all tons of social media days. Like I had somebody tell me a really fun one. They were a plumbing company and it was International Pancake Day. And they pitched a local news story, a story to a local news outlet that on International Pancake Day, you don't want to pour your pancake mix down the drain because it can ruin your pipes. And, they pitch this little nugget with some tips from the plumber, and then boom, you get a link back to your plumbing website from a high DA, high authority news outlet. Um, so that's kind of like the news jacking thing. And then there's also source of sources, help a reporter out, Harrow, quoted. There's these platforms. Some of them are free, some of them you have to pay, but where journalists will actively seek you out for questions. They'll say, hey, I'm looking for an expert on whatever topic. And if you can provide something timely in a timely manner and with some interesting value and interesting take on it, you can also get a citation there. So those are kind of like the tactics, I think. Like it's important, I think, to get started to know what's at your disposal because not everybody's going to be able to do every one of those things. Really, the expert commentary thing is probably the easiest. Um, but then, to your point, like what do you do once you have this interesting story? I mean, you can use those platforms, the quoteds, the Harrows, which connect you directly to a journalist. But if you want to actively pitch to them, you have to know who to pitch to. So, yeah, I mean, you bring a great point with these media databases. So I think the issue that we're facing right now in digital PR is we actually did this big study, the state of digital PR earlier in the year. We interviewed a bunch of PRs, and their biggest gripe with these media databases was that either the contacts were out of date or they were just straight up incorrect. The people, didn't work there. So there are challenges with these like big Rolodexes because it's tough. Like people are leaving, people are changing beats. There's layoffs happening all over the publishing community. So these media databases, unless they're updated on like a daily basis, which is impossible because they have millions and millions of people on these,
They're
what you
massive.
end up with
Yeah.
is, yeah, you end up with these outdated sources and they're expensive. Um, so I think, in talking with a lot of PRs and I myself, when I did it, I also never used a media database. I would always just build my list on the fly and I go to Google News or just Google search and either find competitor content that had a bunch of backlinks and kind of lean on that, or just see on Google News what people were talking about, if I could find people talking about similar topics. So, um, I mean, I could go on and on with this because I'm very interested in this thing, but the media database, the last thing I'll say is kind of a shameless plug. We just are literally like a few days ago, here when we're recording this, it might even be further along by the time this goes live, but we released this tool called List IQ, which basically helps you build those lists manually, but speeds up the process. So you can extract a bunch of URLs from a Google News search or Google search, and it'll pull the author, their bio, their email address, all this stuff that makes it easy for you to understand who it is, and you can kind of personalize an email that way.
Really nice. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing we've been doing the Harrow type space for about 7 years now. Uh, and I was completely surprised a year or two ago, a client came back after a couple year absence. And this is a client we'd done something like 300, 400 links for, and all the big publications. And their sentence, I'm paraphrasing, but pretty much was the links were nice. It was kind of like a pat on the head. And they were like, and the links are our bread and butter, so I was like a little dejected. But the relationships were extremely valuable. And so
Mhm.
I think that's what another thing people are finding is, and like to your point, I think you want to invest in your own building your own Rolodex as early as possible. I mean, the tools are cool, and List IQ, if it's going to help you build your own personalized Rolodex, that's what our team relies on long term. It's there's all these trade-offs, right? But if you can take the time to build your own relationships, I think I think that's the way to go. I wanted to ask you on the relationship building side, what about when you're not actively doing outreach? Are you still sending little touch points to the journalists that you do have relationships with, or are you like completely cold? And when you have a story, because they're humans. Some people are like, don't email me unless you have a pitch, and some people are like, how come you never email me unless you have a
Yeah,
pitch?
yeah. Unless you want something.
Hey, I'm so glad you're enjoying the video so far. If you want our help to keep your traffic trending up, please click that first link in the description down there. That lets you message me directly and I'll get right back to you. Looking forward to helping you out, and please enjoy the rest of this video.
Yeah, Greg, I feel like it's there's a sliding scale. So like, if you are a local plumber, let's say, is keeping using that as an example,
Yeah.
um, you know, you can, I think it benefits you to kind of stay in touch with these journalists. I mean, even if you're an agency, or I'd say maybe especially if you're an agency, it does benefit you to stay in touch with these journalists because it kind of just gives you that foot in the door, right? So you're not a cold email. Um, but to the degree and extent that you're talking, like, you don't want to be creepy and just
Yeah.
popping up. But I'd say some of the stuff that people have done and I used to do and kind of still do, kind of in a different light, which I can touch on, is just like liking their social posts. So
Mhm.
I think the big thing with journalists that a lot of people think, or a lot of people forget, and you kind of touched on there, is like they are people too. They have
Yeah.
goals, they have KPIs, and one of their KPIs is getting eyeballs on their articles, right? So if most journalists, I'd say, do this in some degree, but they will repost their article on Facebook, on Twitter, on whatever. So if you engage with that, repost it, even when it's not your own stuff, maybe make a note about it, have some comment about it where it's, you're not just reposting. I think that kind of stuff does go a long way because then when your name comes up in their inbox, it's like, oh yeah, that's the person that said that insightful thing about my post, or that's Vince. He always shares my posts, so I should at least read his article or read his email. And I'll say for my end, like, PR means a lot to different people, right? So for BuzzStream, I try to maintain all the relationships I can um, in different ways. I mean, you want to provide value to people. And for journalists, you're providing value through pitching them stories, right? And quotes if they need it. But for other people, that value might be something else. So, it might be getting them a link or asking them for expert commentary, get them, featured on your website or whatever, or inviting them on a podcast. Like that kind of stuff, I think goes a long way. So you got to be strategic about it. You can't be everything to everybody, but I think knowing the ones that are really going to move the needle, I think those might be ones where you can and should invest a little more time in.
We're talking about relationships. I think there's for years SEOs kind of reveled in like, I get to be the nerd that is antisocial, and now and we're about to get to AI for all those who are like, can we just get to like the new sexy thing? Uh, but but there's a lot of chatter in SEO about how we're going to need to be marketers again, like recognize that SEO is marketing, and we're talking about relationships because SEOs, especially link builders, the space that I'm in, have a stigma that we're very transactional. We just, we're just trying to get the thing that we want. And so a lot of these conversations I have with people in the journalist outreach and digital PR space is just helping remind us SEOs like these are these could be relationships. And actually, whether you're intentional or not, you do have a relationship with that person. It just may not be a positive one if you're not being very intentional. So
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we just did the study, so not to cut you off, Greg, but
no, you're
I feel
great.
like this we did the study on the kind of spray and pray technique
Right.
versus the, whatever it's sniper technique or targeted, however you want to call it. So essentially, I looked at BuzzStream data and mapped out email volume for different projects against open rates, against click rates, and against overall coverage rates. And you saw that the smaller, more targeted lists were the ones that got the highest opens, clicks, and coverage. And that's not to mean, hey, just cut your list down to, by 25%. Like, no, it's these are people that are spending the time to, find the right people, make sure you're not burning bridges with journalists, and you're doing it the right way. And I think it pays dividends. I mean, the I think we struggle in this industry. There's such a need to monetize everything, and especially in an agency, everything is by the hour, and you have to. There's slim margins. I get it. I mean, I've been on the other side of it. So, it's you're incentivized by volume of however many links you can get, right? At the end of the day, usually. So, typically, people think more outreach I send, the more links I will get. It is a numbers game, but we're seeing that that's not necessarily the case. And I bring that up to say also on the relationship side, I've heard time and time again that from journalists, the number one reason they will block you, just straight up block you, is if they get an irrelevant pitch. You're just right in this to the spam folder
That's
if you're
right.
not there already. But so you're kind of hurting your future success as well. I think it was what you were getting at too. And I don't think that's something that people think about a lot, because you are so sometimes under the gun to get out a certain amount of emails or a certain amount of links. And it's like, well, you make this one that's maybe a 75% fit versus this 100% fit. Like that 75% fit could be a link or a piece of coverage down the line that you just totally burned.
Yeah, we have a pretty extensive training process before we let someone touch a client account, and that's unfortunately the exit point for some people where not first offense, but where they can't grasp that because on top of it, we also compensate people for the wins, right? So they're heavily incentivized to get the wins, and some people are get the win at all costs, and who's paying? It's actually the client. It's their brand. So yeah, if you're whether you're representing clients or yourself, you got to keep it in mind. I actually just to underscore for people, I hadn't heard your previous advice. I think it's great. I was going for, do we reach out directly to them to nurture the relationship? But the sharing and the commenting and the liking, I think that's an awesome bit of advice, Vince. I think
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
easy access point.
again, it's like, yeah, but it's just being a human. I mean, one time I got not to like toot my own horn, but just to give people a sense of like what it means to give value and like
Right.
maintain a relationship. Like I had somebody pitch me this really awesome, like they sent me a video. It was like a SEO consultant or a writer or something. And he was like, here are like three things I would do to your content. And he sent me a Zoom video and like was showing me what he would do and why this would, I did it for this, and look at the increase of traffic, whatever. I was like, man, this guy really did his homework. He did, and like I hate to just be like, sorry, not interested. And so instead of that, I shared his video. I reached out. I was like, I hope you don't mind. Like, I'd love to just share this. Like, I can't use you, but I'm sure there's somebody else
Yeah.
that would get value out of this. So like, thinking beyond the just a link is not the only value you can give, or a coverage is not the only value you can give, and I think it goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, if that was too much for people, too much kind of intangible, let's get into what people want to hear. Like, what does this mean for AI mentions? I, like you, have seen a lot, and some people say there's consensus around X or Y. I don't see a lot of consensus around anything right now. I see like a massive amount of tools, certain people saying they know what to do. When I press them, they don't actually know or they don't respond. So I'm just curious, like what are you seeing around the corner, or
Yeah,
if you'd like to color it with like what degree of confidence, because that's I don't personally how I feel comfortable right now. But we,
right.
as a starting point, we talked about brand mentions. It's self-serving for me to start there, just to be clear, because that's like 90% of the links we build are branded. But it's really hard for me to imagine a future in where brand matters less. So that's one thing I can offer to the conversation, that I'm seeing brand, getting your brand in other people's content, it's showing up in responses. But what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I just saw that study from Ahrefs that found this was specific to AI overview. So Google brand mentions were the highest correlated factor to showing up in AI overviews, which makes sense. I mean, um, you think back to like the helpful content stuff to helpful content updates. I think Google was also valuing a lot of people who had brand mentions as well, linked brand mentions. Um, those were some of the things that some of these studies found when looking at the winners, the helpful content updates. So I think from a Google perspective, like brand really matters to them. ChatGPT, however, I mean, I'm sure brand matters for sure, but just the studies that I've seen there, there was this big Ziff Davis study that looked at all of the looked at all the citations of publishers that early data sets used to train the GPT models were they were saying they were curating the data sets. So basically, like the early data sets was like slog up a lot of crap from the internet, like Reddit posts and whatever, and then they'd have to kind of filter out that noise, and they did it by kind of supporting those data sets with specifically high DA publishers. Um, and they found there was a high correlation of these high DA publishers in these data sets specific to GPT. So that kind of supports this idea that like there are data partnerships that you're seeing happening as well with these AI partners and publishers. I mean, they're using the data no matter what, but like now they're really probably my thought is they're really using the data from these publishers and it leads you to believe, okay, so maybe I just need to focus if I want to show up in ChatGPT, try to focus on those publishers that are training the data set, right? Or training them the model. So I do think it's a little bit of a wild west right now, because don't know what we don't know, and it's changing every day. But I can say, like, the brand thing, I don't think, to your point, I totally agree, Greg. Like, I don't think that's going away. I think it's only going to get stronger. And I think that's backed up by years of Google search users and the way that people interact, on search. It's like if you see a brand that you're going to click on that brand and no amount of SEO or whatever is going to get you a better ranking if people recognize, whatever Home Depot and your Joe's hardware store. Like you, Home Depot's always going to get that click. So I think brand is always going to matter, and I think this kind of just puts digital PR like in a much broader light. Like I said earlier, I think we're going to continue to see people start to really push the needle on that. And the last thing I'll say is with AI, I think it is starting to push out some journalists, which we are seeing, like Business Insider, for instance, a few days ago, laid off like 20% of their workforce. And we're seeing a lot of this happen, especially in the UK. Um, and it's not pushing it out because they're like AI is writing content. It's all of the kind of top funnel content, the informational content. I mean, we're seeing this across the board, but like all the informational top funnel stuff is just being eaten up by GPTs and AI. So I think publishers have less to write, and so, maybe they overhired to bring in some money through affiliate partnerships and all this like informational stuff to bring in traffic, and now they don't have it. So what we're coming up with now, I mentioned that more people are going to be offering digital PR because what's happening is fewer journalists and more people trying to get these brand mentions from the fewer journalists that are left. It's going to be a very competitive market. Um, so when you ask, what am I seeing around the corner? I think it's that. It's going to be this mad scramble for mentions, brand mentions, links, um, and, linked or unlinked, I'd say, and fewer journalists to go around. So it'll be very interesting. And like, I think the people that are going to win are going to be the ones who, like we said, spend the time to interact like a real person, treat the reporters and journalists like real people, and send that super highly targeted outreach that you need. Not to mention having a compelling story. I mean, we didn't really get into any of that, but like having compelling data and stories, that's a given. But I do think the playing field is going to be pretty crowded.
Yeah, no, you can see it. There's tons of outreach specialists making this transition right now, so that makes sense. What, Vince, as we come towards the end here, I always like to ask people, what I do my best with the questions I've got, talking sometimes about subjects I'm not the most informed. What did I not ask? What do you think would have been great to share with the audience?
No, I mean, I think I've spent the last kind of 6 months, I'd say, kind of putting together this case for digital PR because I have made a pretty big shift in the way I'm doing content for BuzzStream even. Like I was doing a lot of search-driven stuff, kind of more top funnel stuff, informational. And now I'm kind of really focusing on what new, fresh data can I put out there. I'm kind of banking on a lot of that to drive some of the growth, get more links, get more mentions. But having said that, like I do now also think I need to pivot even more into getting the brand out there in different ways. I mean, we've invested in my like the BuzzStream podcast, newsletter for like owned audience, but I think there's a lot more we can be doing, and I'm trying to ramp up LinkedIn presence and social. We've talked about maybe even having a conference down the line. So I think there's ways to get the brand out there that are outside of just pitching, journalists. Um, and so that's an important thing to think about. And to kind of echo your point, like we got to start becoming marketers again, which is great and honestly like refreshing. Hopefully, the like spammy stuff will take a back seat and people will start thinking bigger again and not trying to over engineer everything to death. So yeah, and the other thing I'll just say is to remind everyone this tool List IQ is in beta. We've been working really hard on it and really excited. And hopefully it's free right now. It'll probably still be free by the time this comes out, the end of July. But if not, um, for all BuzzStream users, there's going to be like credits involved, like free credits. So, but reach out to me and I'll help you navigate through it and let you know where BuzzStream is at with List IQ by the time this goes live.
That's awesome, Vince. Where should people reach out to you? I really appreciate this. This is educational for me. I can tell. I'd love to stay in touch. Where should people find you?
Yeah, I'm super active on LinkedIn. That's really the main focus today for me. So yeah, reach out, DM me. I'd say if you're gonna connect with me, I pretty much say no to all of them unless someone puts some type of, comment or tells me
What?
they're gonna connect.
Why aren't people sending a a note? Like how it's 2025. Like why would you not send a note? It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, you get out just a lot of garbage, I think, out there, and everything's a pitch, and yeah. So,
I mean, even a pitch I'm okay with, but like, because the pitch is coming, but like, just send a note.
right.
Like, just,
Yeah, yeah.
anyway, that's awesome. So find you on LinkedIn. Vince, thank you for this. We're gonna clip this up because there's a couple points where I was like, oh man, these are great pieces of advice. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I mean, all this stuff, we have the newsletter, like I said, our blog is still very active. So you can check it all out there as well. Just buzzstream.com/blog or slash, I think it might be slash podcast. Should know all my stuff.
Well, you put a lot out there. And again, thanks for the reminder on the lights. That's just pretty awesome. I can't take my eyes off it. So,
Yeah, yeah. Mike Farisi, he helped me set up some of my early video stuff. He's the one that told me about this. So I gotta give shout out back to Mike too.
all right. I'll look you up, Mike. Thanks. Okay, Vince. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.